Now it was Lord Mountrago's turn to be silent. It looked as though he found it hard to answer. Dr. Audlin waited. At last, Lord Mountrago seemed to make an effort. He spoke. "I'm in perfect health. I was examined by my own doctor just recently. He's Sir Augustus Fitzherbert. Perhaps you've heard of him. He tells me I'm as fit as a man of 30. I work hard, but I'm never tired, and I enjoy my work. I smoke very little and do not drink much. I take enough exercise, and I lead a regular life. I am a perfectly normal, healthy man. I quite expect you to think me childish in coming to see you." Dr. Audlin saw that he must help him. "I don't know if I can do anything for you. I'll try. You're unhappy." "My present work is important. The decisions that I have to make affect the country and even the peace of the world. It is necessary that my judgment should be good and my brain clear. I consider it my duty to rid myself of any cause of worry that may prevent this." Dr. Audlin had never taken his eyes off him. He saw a great deal. He saw behind the man's pride an anxiety that he could not get rid of. "I asked you to be good enough to come here because I know by experience that it's easier for someone to speak openly in a doctor's room than in his usual surroundings." It was clear that Lord Mountrago, usually so quick and decided, at this moment did not know what to say. He smiled to show the doctor that he was relaxed, but his eyes showed his real feelings. He spoke again. "The whole thing's so unimportant that I can hardly bring myself to trouble you with it. I'm afraid you'll just tell me not to be a fool and waste your valuable time." Even things that seem unimportant may have their importance. They can be signs of deeper troubles, and my time is at your service. Dr. Audlin's voice was low and serious. It was strangely calming. Lord Mountrago, at last, made up his mind to speak openly. "The fact is, I've been having some dreams recently that have been bothering me. I know it's foolish to pay any attention to them, but, well, the honest truth is, they've begun to have an effect on my nerves." "Can you describe any of them to me?" "They're so foolish I can hardly begin to tell them." "Never mind." "Well, the first I had was about a month ago. I dreamt that I was at a party at Connemara House. It was an official party. The King and Queen were going to be there. I went to take off my coat, and there was a little man in the room called Owen Griffiths, who's a Welsh Member of Parliament, and to tell you the truth, I was surprised to see him. He's very common, and I said to myself, really, Lydia Connemara shouldn't have asked him to her house. Whom will she ask next? I thought that he looked at me rather strangely, but I didn't take any notice of him. In fact, I did not speak a word, and I walked upstairs. I suppose you've never been there?" "Never." "No, it's not the sort of house you would ever go to. It's in rather bad taste, but it's got a very fine stone staircase, and the Connemara's were at the top receiving their guests. Lady Connemara gave me a look of surprise when I shook hands with her, and began to laugh. I didn't pay much attention. She's a foolish woman, and her manners are no better than those of her relatives. I must say, the rooms at Connemara House are very grand. I walked through, shaking hands with a number of people. Then I saw the German minister talking with an Austrian lord. I particularly wanted to have a word with him, so I went up and held out my hand. As soon as he saw me, he burst out laughing. I was deeply insulted. I looked him up and down, but he only laughed louder. I was about to speak to him rather sharply, when the room suddenly went quiet, and I realized that the King and Queen had come. Turning my back on him, I stepped forward, and then, quite suddenly, I noticed that I hadn't got any trousers on. I was wearing silk underclothes. It was not surprising that Lady Connemara and the German minister had laughed. I can't tell you how I felt at that moment. The shame! I awoke, shaking. Oh, you don't know how glad I felt to find it was only a dream. It's the kind of dream that's not so very uncommon, said Dr. Audlin. Perhaps not, but a strange thing happened the next day. I was in the House of Commons when Griffiths walked past me. He looked down at my legs, and then he looked me in the face, and there was something in his eyes that made me feel he was laughing at me. A foolish thought came to me. He had been there the night before, and now he was enjoying the joke. But of course I knew that was impossible, because it was only a dream. I gave him an icy look, and he walked on. But he was laughing. Lord Mountrago took his handkerchief out of his pocket and rubbed it over his hands. He was making no attempt now to hide his anxiety. Dr. Audlin never took his eyes off him. Tell me another dream. It was the next night. I dreamt that I was in the House of Commons. We were discussing foreign affairs, and not only the country, but the whole world was waiting for the discussion with serious interest. It was, in fact, a historic occasion. Of course, the House was crowded. Representatives of foreign countries were there. I had to make the most important speech of the evening. I had prepared it carefully. A man like me has enemies. A lot of people are jealous because I have reached the position I have at an early age, and I was determined to speak well. I rose to my feet. When I began to speak, the silence was like the silence of the grave. Suddenly, though, I saw that hateful little devil on one of the seats opposite, Griffiths, the Welsh member. He put out his tongue at me. I don't know if you've ever heard a song called A Bicycle Made for Two. It was very popular many years ago. To show Griffiths my disgust for him, I began to sing it. I sang the first part right through. There was a moment's surprise, and when I finished they cried, "Hear, hear," from the opposition seats to express their approval. I put up my hand to silence them and sang the second part. The members listened to me in complete silence, and I felt that the song wasn't being received very well. I was angry, because I have a good voice, and I was determined that they should be fair to me. When I started the third part, the members began to laugh. In a moment, the laughter spread. Everyone in the house shook. They cheered, they held their sides, they rolled on the seats. Everyone was helpless with laughter, except the government ministers just behind me. They sat as if turned to stone. I gave them a look, and I suddenly understood the terrible thing that I had done. The whole world would laugh at me. I realized that I would have to leave my post in the government. I woke and realized that it was only a dream. Lord Mountrago's proud manner had left him as he told this, and now, having finished, he was pale and trembling. But with an effort he regained his calm. He forced a laugh to his shaking lips. The whole thing was so crazy that I couldn't help being amused. I didn't give it another thought, and when I went into the house on the following afternoon, I was feeling good. I sat in my place and read some papers that demanded my attention. For some reason, I chanced to look up, and I saw that Griffiths was speaking. I couldn't imagine that he had anything to say that was worth listening to, and I was about to return to my papers when he mentioned 2 lines from A Bicycle Made for Two. I couldn't help looking at him, and I saw that his eyes were fixed on me, and that there was a cruel smile on his lips. I didn't care. It was just strange that he'd included in his speech 2 lines from that terrible song that I'd sung in my dream. I began to read my papers again, but I found it difficult to think about them. Owen Griffiths had been in my first dream, the one at Connemara House, and I thought afterwards that he knew how foolish I had looked. Was it pure chance that he'd used those 2 lines from the song? I asked myself if it was possible that he was dreaming the same dreams as I was. But of course it wasn't, and I decided not to give it a second thought.